Välkommen alla sammen. This is gonna be a quick little video, but I hope it's gonna be a real big eye-opener for some of the beginners and kind of give you a better understanding of how pagan religion was actually historically practiced. So, the problem I see a lot is there's a lot of people way too focused on the gods, worshipping the gods, giving offerings to the gods, searching for the gods, speaking to the gods every day, they even say they're doing. And as usual, people are trying to put a very Christian idea onto a very unchristian religion, a very unchristian pagan religion. So in reality, contact and worship of the Norse gods was a very rare occurrence and only a small part of how paganism was actually practiced in ancient times. And I'm going to share with you some of the research that helps show you what I mean. And this is just not my opinion. This is any scholar or historian looking into these things think this, and here is some of the evidence why. First, there's only a small handful of examples of gods being worshipped in the literature, but much more examples of other spiritual entities being worshipped. One mention of the gods being worshipped is Adam of Bremen's account of the sacrifice at Uppsala, where he saw statues of Thor and Odin and Freyr and saw that they were being worshipped. Then we have another example in Håkon the Good's saga, where toasts were drunk to Odin, Freyr, and Freya. So there are a couple more examples like this, but always when it happens, when the gods were worshipped, it's a very specific time of year in a very specific hall or temple at a sacred place, usually a key cult worship site. We really don't have any evidence that the gods were worshipped on the regular. As a matter of fact, we see a lot more records of worship of other spiritual entities in pagan times. We actually see multiple ceremonies per year performed for other spiritual entities like the Disir or the elves, ancestral spirits, and we see multiple sacrifices and bloods per year performed for other reasons like good harvest, for good luck for the coming year, for victory, and these were performed in all kinds of remote villages and all over the place, and we have really dozens of records of ceremonies like this being performed on the regular all over the place. And on top of that, the archaeological evidence helps confirm this. So all these figurines that you see, statuettes, pendants, and things like that have to do with the gods, the vast majority of times they are only found at major sites of worship such as Leire, Uppsala, and we almost never find these at archaeological digs in more remote villages, always at a central cult worship site. Also, these artifacts depicting gods are usually not very old. Most of them are dated to the late Viking age, and that leads scholars to believe two things. The first, just like I mentioned earlier, it's that the gods were worshipped very rarely and only at very specific religious sites. Definitely not a widespread, regular practice. And the second thing that they conclude is that they think these gods and figurines reflects Christian assimilation to the religious figures that came later in time. The Norse saw the Christians had images and statues of their Jesus and saints. So then the pagans also started to do this, create artwork and worship their gods as little figurettes, as physical beings like that. But originally, the gods were not the most central part of pagan religious practice. The gods were absolutely important in other ways, but not a central part of the practice day to day. And even if they were, at the few times a year when they were worshipped, the gods are not hanging around our dumbasses all day waiting for you to talk to them. No, the gods have better things to do, and you would be lucky to see them once a year, maybe at a high festival or a sacred ceremony or even a battle, a war. So those are just some of the things that we have records of the gods being present at. So what kinds of other spiritual entities can we expect to be in more contact with? Well, here's a list. You can read all about these in most of the sagas, and even a lot of the law codes that prohibited summoning these spirits in Christian times. There are hundreds of records that show the belief and worship in these things, and they're here at all times of year, even in the most remote areas. And also, these were worshipped and contacted much after the Viking Age, when Christianity was official in Scandinavia. The belief in these things really continued all the way up until 100 or 200 years ago in Scandinavia. They were still being contacted, and the belief in these types of spirits is actually very similar to other primitive cultures around the world. So that's just the point I wanted to make in this video, that these other spiritual entities are just as important as the gods. And for day-to-day worship, they're even more important than gods, because they're the ones that we would be coming in regular contact with. The spirits of Thor and Odin, they're not hanging around your asses all day waiting for you to tell them about your, relationship problems and praying to them. No, this is a 100% Christian way of thinking that doesn't belong in our beliefs. The idea that God is everywhere, God is listening to us, watching us all the time, this is 100% a Christian invention or a monotheistic invention, and it has no place in paganism. The spirits of Odin and Thor, like I said, are not hanging around. They have better things to do. However, I will say one thing, that from the historical records, there are for sure ways to summon the old gods. Like I said, at certain times, at high festivals, war, other significant events like that. But that's a long subject, and I'll go into that in another video because it is interesting. But I just made this one to encourage people not to ignore these other important spirits. And pagans new to our religion need to totally forget what they know about traditional religion and come at paganism with a fresh and open mind. Only then can we really start to realize how it was historically practiced. So that's all I had to say for today. Hope you got a little bit of information out of that, but vi ses nästa gång.